Welcome to the Squint podcast. Today we are so excited to welcome Dr. Sara Pugh. Sara has a degree in biochemistry and genetics, as well as a PhD in molecular mechanisms and biophysics. Let's just say she's a hardcore scientist in both biochemistry and biophysics, and has more recently turned her attention to quantum biology and quantum physics. In fact, she's a board-certified quantum biology practitioner. In short, Sara is taking a closer look at so many areas of science that matter to us. She's using her knowledge to better understand how our bodies actually work. She's looking at issues that really matter to us, like hormones, metabolism, sleep, anxiety, and just about everything that affects our life every day. We're so lucky to welcome Sara to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Great. So let's just dig right in. There's so many things I want to ask you, but I wanted to kind of address just kind of a general, I guess it's a malaise in centralized medicine. And when I talk to women in the United States, everyone's struggling, everyone has symptoms, everyone's looking for answers. And we seem to be drowning in solutions, but just not the right solutions. What are you seeing in the people? You're obviously a practitioner. What are you seeing in both women and men, and what issues they're dealing with?
Well, I'd say a lot of the issues are regarding isolation from nature and very bad light environment, as well as dehydration, bad mitochondria. And this would just manifest as things like hormonal disruptions, bad sleep, weight problems, metabolic disease like diabetes and insulin resistance, mental health problems, all sorts of things, skin problems, chronic fatigue, and a lot more. I think osteoporosis can be coming earlier. That's sort of relevant for women. It's getting more difficult to conceive. It's both fertility's down in both men and women. So it sort of affects every aspect of health that you could imagine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so at Squint, we're trying to, we're at the basics here, and we're talking to people about getting their light right on a basic level and how that impacts so many, that huge list you just talked about. So I wanted to dig in on, kind of subject by subject, if you'll, entertain this, but I wanted to start with UV light and metabolism, because a lot of the women that I'm talking to, they struggle with metabolism issues, they've had weight issues, and they never associate light, sunlight, and particularly UV light that's demonized when we go to the dermatologist. They never associate that with healthy metabolism. Can you touch on the effect of sunlight and metabolism and weight loss?
Oh, yes, of course. Can I just backtrack a bit? Because the sunrise is extremely important for metabolism, because when you see the sunrise, it's a particular blend of blue, violet, and red light. And this stimulates not only sort of leptin pathways, but also opsins, which are important for metabolism. And just in simple terms, it sets your body clocks up for the day. So that means all of your biochemical timing is on point. And the more on point or coherent you are, the more efficient your metabolism is going to be. And also, we have things in our cells called mitochondria, and that's, in simple terms, when we eat food by a very long process, it ends up going through the mitochondria, and something called beta oxidation is what burning fat is. So we need to have healthy mitochondria in order to have a healthy metabolism. And beta oxidation is fat burning. And when you see the sunrise, it starts this process up correctly. So there's numerous reasons why seeing the sunrise is really important for setting your hormones for the day. Also, it's really important, as I said, for your body clocks. And then the next important phase to do with metabolism and weight, we could say the UV rise. So that comes, it depends on your location, but it's ultraviolet A. So in terms of metabolism, it's really important for regulating neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, because they play a role in, say, our food choices, or a lot of people struggle with their weight because they're craving things that they shouldn't, and then they don't feel satisfied. then also the UVA rise, that's important for thyroid function, but so is the sunrise. That sort of governs a very deep energy pathway in the body, the central retinal pathway. But just in simple language, the UVA rise is really important for making the thyroid hormone active. And a lot of people are aware that thyroid is, I would just call it a metabolism hormone. And having worked a lot with clients in the USA, I see people at extremely young ages. I had somebody the other day who was in her 20s on thyroid medication, and it seems to be that everybody's on thyroid medication. So there's obviously a problem. So first of all, people are not seeing the sunrise, and then they're frightened of ultraviolet light, or they don't realize just opening a window would let the light in for signals. Then we move on to UVB, which is important for making vitamin D. And there's lots of studies linking natural vitamin D that we make from the sun with a healthy metabolism and leptin. And also there's 12 different forms of vitamin A, which the sunlight plays a role in activating. And there are also plenty of studies showing that vitamin A deficiency leads into obesity or metabolic problems. So absolutely, I must emphasize, not vitamin A supplements, especially, they're harmful. And then there are problems with supplementing vitamin D as a chemical or a compound, because it's nothing like what we make naturally from the sun. Then there's another time in the afternoon where there's another patch where there's more ultraviolet A light. And I found that that time of day can be really helpful for curbing evening snacking or eating, because a lot of people who struggle with weight do really well all day, and then they get overwhelmed by wanting to snack in the evening. There's another thing which does that, which would be exposure to too much artificial blue light. So that would be from LEDs, from the mall, your phone, computers. And this is going to dysregulate your blood sugar and insulin, which are important for metabolism. Because if people are insulin resistant, even if you don't know anything about quantum biology, there's plenty of studies showing if people are insulin resistant, they're more in storage mode, as in terms of body fat, as opposed to using energy. So the artificial blue light, which we can encounter during the day, is problematic. Then there's natural blue light that comes from the sun, which first of all sets our body clock, but also there are studies showing how natural blue light from the sun is very important for making fat cells be the right size, as in it makes them, there's evidence that it helps to shrink them, but also there's other studies showing that natural blue light from the sun is very helpful just overall for metabolic rate. The other important thing about UV exposure is that it produces something called alpha MSH, which both makes melanin, but also alpha MSH is an appetite suppressant. So that would be kind of the daylight exposure that's really important for metabolism. The next thing, everything's always paired in biology. So darkness is just as important as light. So after sunset, it's really important to block the artificial blue light, because first of all, as I said before, it can disrupt blood sugar, which can mean people, and cortisol, which can mean people are more likely to want to eat things they shouldn't in the evening. And also, if we expose ourselves to too much blue light and bright light close to bed, we don't make melatonin properly. And melatonin is a sleep hormone. It's also a hormone of both light and darkness. But importantly for your question, melatonin regulates the metabolism. So it is important for fat burning, because we burn most of our fat when we're in ketosis at night when we're sleeping. So there's an important link into light here. And then melatonin is really important for other things like autophagy, which is taking the trash out of the cells, and it's sort of an anti-cancer hormone. And also melatonin regulates sex hormones as well, because in terms of a healthy metabolism, testosterone and progesterone and estrogen in the right balance are really important, because estrogen dominance, of course, can cause water retention or weight gain, because fat makes estrogen, and then estrogen loves fat. However, not enough estrogen is also going to be detrimental to the metabolism, and those sex hormones are very driven by light. So there's numerous reasons of how light can tie into metabolism, be it the mitochondria, Leptin is a light-driven hormone, so it's dependent on seeing the sunrise, making sure that you've got enough UV light exposure, because it measures how much energy you've got on board in an electromagnetic sense. So if you don't have enough energy from the sunlight, water, grounding, magnetism, your body's going to either conserve energy by slowing down your metabolism, or try to get more food electrons by making you crave or desire food.
Right. Okay, that was amazing. You packed in a lot of info. I need to rewind, and I'm hoping you can extrapolate on a few things. So, in order of my notes, I'd like to touch a little bit about thyroid. And I see so many women that, they're having thyroid issues and they go to the doctor and then they're put on Synthroid, they're put on this synthetic T3. And then we have conversations and they don't understand the sun, and they don't understand the sun's impact on creating T3 and also converting T4 to T3. Can you talk about the sun as it relates to thyroid health specifically?
Okay, so that's kind of multifaceted. So first of all, the thyroid is made out of something called tyrosine. So that's an amino acid. And when I did protein folding, we used to shine UV light all the time at proteins because they have tryptophans and tyrosines in them, because it's ultraviolet active. So the light signal from the sun is something that is going to trigger the biochemical reactions, because it's a bit like making a cake. You can have all the ingredients in the world, but you still need to put your cake in the oven to bake it. So with biochemistry, you can have all of the ingredients, the iodine, the tyrosine, but you actually need the sunlight to be able to help with the timing and to make that reaction happen. So that's a really important aspect there for thyroid. And another thing about light is the thyroid's very, very close to the surface. So if you're exposing yourself to a blue lit computer all the time, you're shining blue light. Yeah, I've got Iris on my computer and I've got a window open there. So yes, so I think also the thyroid's taking a double hit, first of all from the blue light because it's so close to the surface, and then not getting the proper signal. So it's not just the UV light, it's the sunrise as well. People have to see that for thyroid health, because that pathway is intricately tied into thyroid. There's a lot more to do with the conversion, because obviously we have problems with things like pollution and stuff like, say, mercury, for example, that can inhibit the conversion of T4 to T3. But as I said before, melanin can help mop up toxins, so it can bind to metals, and we need to expose ourselves to UV light to make melanin. And then of course going outside, we're exposed to the red and the near infrared light, so that's going to expand what we would call our water battery, which is actually exclusion zone or fourth phase water. So it can create a barrier and push stuff out that we don't want, which could be a numerous number of toxins, because only a few things can pass through this barrier. And then on the subject of thyroid and light, it's not just about the thyroid hormone, it's about the receptor as well. So in biochemistry, it's like a lock and a key. So we'll just say the thyroid hormone, the T3, the active one, is the key, and the receptor's the lock. And if the receptor's not hydrated enough properly with this fourth phase water, then it doesn't work as efficiently. We've all had a door that you have to open the key, put the key in and kind of sing to it. It's a special way. It doesn't just go in and turn. So if you're low in exclusion zone water, then it just means your receptors for your thyroid are not going to function as well as they could. So that's another dimension to thyroid. And an additional dimension to thyroid is we have to bear in mind that the thyroid hormone, we want it inside the cells, not necessarily in the blood, because it's not going to do anything there. And calcium will block the thyroid getting into the cell. This is well known. This is why a lot of people find eating dairy causes weight gain, because it's too much calcium, and then it ends up in the blood and it can do things which it shouldn't. I'm not going to go too much into food. That's a whole other podcast. We'll just stick to light. So with non-native EMF, which is invisible light, that's say from Wi-Fi or too much mobile phone use or too much tech in the house, not unplugging appliances that you don't need. That can dysregulate the calcium in the blood. And that means that you might show up in a lab test, you've got enough thyroid hormone, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's getting into the cell. So there's numerous aspects of how light ties into thyroid, and all of these are pretty much free to do. So it's free to go out in the UV, it's free to see the sunrise, and it'll actually save you money by not using appliances that you don't need unnecessarily, using your phone wisely. So all of this is kind of very easy to action. And like you said at the beginning, we're drowning in solutions, and most of them seem to be things you have to pay for, or medication or supplements or whatever you have to buy. So in terms of solutions, a lot of very basic things, you have to put a bit of effort in, make it a new habit, but fundamentally it's free. So that those who want to make money out of people being sick don't really want people doing quantum, because it's going to take away their customers.
That's right.
And then, of course, there's other factors to thyroid, like sort of incorrect way of eating will provoke it. Things like Hashimoto's can be triggered. Definitely, there's ways of eating to help with that. I've found that when people have got low levels of vitamin D and high levels of deuterium, that seems to be a recipe for, we would just call it, say, sort of, I don't, Hashimoto's. It's just a time when the thyroid's under stress. So there's lots of things that people can do naturally to help with their thyroids as well.
And the deuterium piece, so deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen, correct? And
Yeah.
there's these heavy hydrogen and light hydrogen. And the heavy hydrogen is what we want to keep out of the mitochondria.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we don't want the heavy hydrogen or the deuterium attaching itself to sex hormones or thyroid hormones, because wherever, with hydrogen, it's the most abundant molecule on the planet. So pretty much every molecule in our body has got loads of hydrogen in it. So there's hydrogen in melatonin, there's hydrogen in thyroid hormone, there's hydrogen in pretty much everything. So when a deuterium takes the place of a hydrogen, because it's bigger and different, it's got different properties, it looks different to the body, so it's not going to be recognized as efficiently or properly by enzymes. So it's just a way to slow things down and burden the body. And something like a leptin reset, which just involves correcting your circadian rhythm at the most simplest form, like what I've gone through, seeing the sunrise, getting extra UVA and B, and then blocking blue light. It's also a deuterium depletion. It's the same thing, just a different word. So by improving your light environment and your circadian rhythm, you're going to improve your body's ability to deplete deuterium, because when you sleep better and you have a better circadian rhythm, as in your biochemical processes and organs and everything all work properly and on time, it's easier to detox or deplete everything, be it heavy metal, which we talked about, can cause problems with thyroid. So absolutely, it's an isotope of hydrogen that's naturally occurring, that isn't allowed in the mitochondria because it can damage them. We don't want deuterium in our hormones because it will make them, it makes it harder for the body to recognize them. To keep it simple, it doesn't matter if deuterium goes into our collagen and our tendons, it's supposed to go in there to give them stability, because that's another thing people complain about a lot these days, is sort of chronic pain. Right. So sometimes the deuterium not where it should be in our connective tissue and out in our hormones and in our mitochondria, that can be a problem as well. And then something else, when you're asking about thyroid and light, quite a lot of SSRIs inhibit the conversion of T4 to T3. And if people embrace seeing the UV rise, where we make serotonin and dopamine, it can be a route to help them taper down and come off the SSRIs, because that can sometimes be the reason why somebody has a thyroid issue. But it's common knowledge with SSRI use that weight gain happens over time. And there are different mechanisms, be it mitochondrial problems with thyroid, or which can change the levels of estrogen and progesterone. So you can use the UV light as a different route to help thyroids as well. So it's multifaceted how the light can help the thyroid. It's not really, it's like a hands down winner.
Right. This is amazing, amazing. I just want to go back to melanin, because I know that is such a critical factor in health overall. And So many women I talk to are suffering from heavy metals and mold and parasites and all the and different issues. Can you talk about the role of melanin in the body as a semiconductor, and also more specifically how it helps our detox pathways as kind of a natural detoxer?
Okay, yeah, so fundamentally our bodies are bioelectric. So the more redox we've got, or electrons, or ability to make a powerful electric current, or cellular voltage, these are all different words for it, the better we'll function. So if melanin can act as a semiconductor, that means it has the ability to be able to pass electrons around the body. So we can talk about it as making our electric current flow better. The other thing about melanin in terms of energy is it has the ability to split water into more electrons and molecular hydrogen. And then hydrogen is a massively important molecule because it's anti-inflammatory. It's also a sort of hormetic molecule. And then if melanin can split water and we can liberate electrons out of the water, that's going to raise our redox. So the higher your redox and the lower your deuterium, the less attractive you are to parasites or mold or all kinds of other things. There's a whole load more I can say about that. It's one of these subjects that it's like a lot of misinformation. But the take-home message is that if melanin's a semiconductor and we want to conduct more electricity and have better electric current in the body, then it's going to be beneficial on an electrical level. It can also create more hydrogen and more electrons. And there's plenty of studies now, probably 2000, all about hydrogen and how it impacts the body and helps it be able to heal naturally. And then I think you had one more question. Oh, it was about, melanin is sort of like a black hole pigment. So that means it can absorb things like all the whole electromagnetic spectrum. So it offers the protection within reason against some non-native EMF. And then it can actually bind to certain toxins. So melanin's always being renovated in the body. It's not just on the outside, it lines nerves and mitochondria and cells. So it's on the inside as well, which offers sort of protection, but it also provides energy as well. And then just for an example, a lot of people are familiar with the substantia nigra in the brain is what gets affected in Parkinson's, along with the basal ganglia. So the substantia nigra is black because it's full of melanin. So melanin is really important in the brain, in the nerves, in the mitochondria as well. So it's one of these things that the more you have, the better. But that doesn't mean you should go out and get sunburned. That's a very terrible idea. And people who are only just discovering this today, if you've been frightened of the sun, you have to build something called a solar color. So you've got to gradually get your body used to being exposed to ultraviolet light. You can't just go out, like you can't just come to El Salvador and go out in the noon sun and expect to get blasted with sunlight and be healed. That would be crazy because it would be dangerous. So it's about changing habits, exposing your body gently to light, and then beginning to build a suntan and all of the other benefits from sun exposure, making more melanin, and then it's a route to better health. And all of this is free. And as you said right at the beginning, more and more people are sick. So whatever system that's out there at the moment to help them isn't working.
Right. So just to go back to the beginning when you were kind of talking about the symphony of light and how it evolves from sunrise, and sunrise is the foundational piece. So I'm talking a lot to people that are following me about building a solar callus and what that actually means. And just reiterating what you said, this isn't about living in New York City and then going to the Bahamas and frying yourself. That is not a good idea. But it's about each day and each season building your solar callus, for example, right now in the Northern Hemisphere in the spring. So when people say, oh, where did you get that tan? Did you go out of town? And I say, no, actually, I built it this morning. And I built it at UVA rise when the sun was around 10 degrees and it was 9 o'clock in the morning. Can you explain when you build melanin?
All right, yeah. So what'll happen is there'll be like the way it works, the sun will strike the skin. Scott Zimmerman's more of an expert on this, and then the signals will pass through, and then you'll probably the actual color or the melanin is not going to happen instantly. It's going to happen over time. And when it comes to making a suntan, you can do it also in the UK. So it doesn't happen instantly. If you go out and you change color, as in you go red, you may have something called erythema, which is just extra blood flow to the skin, which is fine as long as you didn't burn, because I forgot to say that UV light also stimulates nitric oxide. But if you go out and then go red and then go brown, that's not the right way to make a proper suntan. You want to do it gradually, because melanin's constantly being made and then recycled and remodeled. And there's no barrier. I think pretty much when the UVB comes back, even in the UK, even at a UVI of 3, you can still get a suntan and make melanin. Some people can keep their color even in ultraviolet A as long as it's bright enough.
Okay. And then can you talk a little bit more specifically, because we're more beginners at Squint and we are trying to learn exactly how we make UVB. We've looked at the studies. We know the correlation between UVB and holistic health. What is the best way to build UVB, and when do you find it?
Okay, yeah. So with UVB, it's really important for making vitamin D, and there are, like as you correctly said, countless studies on the benefits of vitamin D and what happens if we have low vitamin D, and also just using supplements isn't the solution. So first of all, when we talk about what does a UVI index mean, so it's basically a number that it was made up to guide people on how strong the mixture of UVA and UVB is. And UVB comes out a bit later. So we've got the sunrise, then we've got just the ultraviolet A, and then probably an hour later, the ultraviolet B comes. And you're correct that whatever angle the sun's at, that's going to dictate, we'll just say, what color light the planet receives. So when it comes to making vitamin D, you pretty much can't make it if the UVI is 1 or 2, and then for certain people with darker skin, 3. So in order to make or get exposure to UVB and make vitamin D, you've got to go out sort of more later in the day. So in general, it's really hard to say, because the UVB rise here is about 8 o'clock, whereas in the UK at the moment, it's probably about 10 a.m. So you have to get an app. You can actually look if you don't want to buy an app, you can look in the weather app, and there's a little button which will tell you the ultraviolet index. It's in the weather app. And then there's Sarah Kleiner's app, which is my circadian. There's D-Minder, which is all about vitamin D. So first of all, you've got to go somewhere where the UVI is over 3. So these apps will be able to tell you. And like we said, it's more sort of later on towards the middle of the day. Then secondly, with ultraviolet B, it's going to get blocked by, we'll just call it things to start with. So clothes are going to block it. So if you go out in a coat and a scarf and a hat, you're going to block the UVB. So you're not going to make vitamin D that way. Sun cream, that's going to block all of the UV light, and it's going to let too much of the blue and the cyan light go deep into the skin. So that's bad, because now it opens up the risk of basal cell carcinomas. So we want as little clothes as possible. Then no sunglasses, because that's going to confuse the body. So if we put sunglasses on, the brain thinks, oh, it's pitch black, and it gets confused. So it's very unlikely to make as much vitamin D as you want. So we have to have our skin exposed. We've got to be actually in the sunlight. If it's cloudy, that's stuff in the way as well. So we make far less vitamin D when it's cloudy. We'll still get some of the signals of the UV light, but the actual amount we need on the skin to make vitamin D is going to be a problem if there's clouds. And then, like I said, we don't want to overexpose ourselves and burn or get heat stroke or anything. So it can be advantageous, especially when the UV index is over things like 7 and 8, to go in and out. You could probably safely lie about in it when it's 4 or 5 and be okay. But you still have to bear in mind that we have different, what we'd call Fitzpatrick skin types. because we all know people who, say, from Finland or Sweden or have those kind of heritage. They are very, very blonde hair and very, very porcelain skin. So they're a Fitzpatrick of 1. Also people who've got red hair and freckles, like there's lots of Irish descent in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a Fitzpatrick of 1. Then we get to a 2, which is slightly less fair, but they can still burn a bit. So people tend to have sort of blue eyes, blonde hair, darker skin. And then we go all the way up to a Fitzpatrick of 5, which would be sort of very dark skin. And then we've got things like a Mediterranean and Greek kind of skin type in between, and 3s and 4s. So we've naturally got a different amount of melanin that we're born with, because that's why the melanin question's a bit difficult, because some people have just got melanin, more of it in the skin to give their skin color, and it's just going to stay there. It's not going to move. Well, it will fade and tan, but it's say different to me, who's like a Fitzpatrick 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
So the darker your skin, the more melanin you've got in it anyway, and it's going to act as sort of as a sunscreen. So it means if you've got darker skin, you have to find slightly higher UVB to go out in, and go out in longer to make enough vitamin D. And then people with Fitzpatrick, say 1 and 2, they're going to make vitamin D more easily because they've got less melanin, but they're more likely to burn. Right. So you have to approach the vitamin D making sort of with caution, because as much as people might say, oh yeah, we're sunlight starved, everything is balanced, and we don't want to, nothing's good in excess. It's about timing it properly. And then the other important thing is to always be what I call an N=1, be your own experiment. So that's why it's important to get your own vitamin D levels measured, because there's lots of different reasons, and I'm not going to go into it in too much detail of there are other reasons why some people make more vitamin D than others, and you won't know unless you test on yourself. Right. And it's a very simple test. There's something called active vitamin D as well, which is very easy to get a test for in the USA, like Quest and LabCorp do it. It's not so easy to get in other countries. So you want to know what your own vitamin D levels are, your active and storage D, and then you can learn for yourself what's the best routine that makes a lot of vitamin D, but also that you don't burn, because that's sort of unwise, especially for women, because our skin is sort of slightly different to men in several ways. And if we go crazy in the sun and do other bad things like drinking and smoking and stuff like that, it is going to cause problems. So we have to be mindful of the skin. We also have to be mindful of how important it is to get UV light, because unless somebody just went out, had the time to lie outside all day, most of the time we have to kind of make a routine and allocate time especially to go out in the sun, where I definitely do because I have to work. But then, exactly as you said earlier, just going off to Mexico or the Bahamas or Hawaii and frying yourself for 2 weeks and thinking that that's the best way, that doesn't work either. There's lots of benefits to going to these sunnier places or to the equator, but just going there without preparing your skin first and overexposing yourself to the sun isn't helpful either.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the UVA and nitric oxide?
Oh yeah, so nitric oxide is a really interesting molecule. Yes, yeah, because I can't remember exactly what year when it was discovered. The scientists who discovered it won a Nobel Prize. And nitric oxide is really important for lowering blood pressure, which is another big, massive problem in the Western world. And also it's very important for our brain function and for our what we'll call the immune system. So when we expose ourselves to UVA, it's slightly different to making the neurotransmitters. So when we make the neurotransmitters, it can be good enough to get the signal just in our eyes and whatever skin's exposed. Whereas for the nitric oxide, we want to have as little clothes as possible. So we want the nitric oxide, the UV to go on the body as much as possible, and that's going to produce nitric oxide like systemically. And there are all sorts of supplements for sort of releasing nitric oxide, but the natural and best way to do it is by using UVA light. And also, as we get older, we get slightly worse at making nitric oxide. So it's a really important molecule for health, because a lot of people, especially after the menopause start to report problems like more insulin resistance, more inflammation. The risk of cardiovascular events is greater in women after the menopause. So it's really important to control blood pressure, because that's one thing that we all agree on. Everybody agrees that high blood pressure is bad for our outcomes of cardiovascular disease. The whole thing about the cholesterol nonsense and myth, that's more of a red herring. And then also the nitric oxide is really important for immune function as well. So it's a very important molecule. And like I said, the less clothes, the better for the UVA and the nitric oxide. Whereas I appreciate people are busy, they've got children to take to places. Sometimes they can only manage to get outside for 5 minutes and they can't take all their clothes off because it's work or they're dropping their children off to school. Whereas if you've got the opportunity to take clothes off and go in the UVA, you'll get a benefit from the nitric oxide.
Okay. I'm going to transition a little bit to movement and the importance of movement and fascia and how fascia works in our body as another semiconductor for light and the importance of hydration within that context.
Oh, yeah, sure. So actually, I worked as a movement teacher for 13 years. So back then, when people who were in that area knew all about water and hydration and light anyway, it was just not sort of, we didn't really have, like, social media wasn't as big then. So first of all, with fascia, it's basically what holds us together. So our arm doesn't fall apart if we say sort of reached and like get pulled out if we swung. And also the other thing about fascia is we don't want it tangled up, because it's like having to carry a sack of rocks around. So there are implications. Some types of chronic fatigue is because the fascia is all stuck to itself, and it's like having to drag around an extra 3 bodies because the fascia isn't moving properly. The thing with fascia is it's got different sort of components to it, but what people are most familiar with is collagen, and that first of all needs to be wet and hydrated in order to function properly. But it's also something called piezoelectric, so that means when you move it about, it can produce electrons. So as I said at the beginning, the more electrons or cellular voltage or redox or electricity, whatever you want to call it, you've got, the better. So the fascia is also, because of its water and its collagen, it acts as a sort of communication system in the body, because it's not just about having energy in the body. We want our signals or communication to be as quick as possible. So if we're well hydrated, because water, of course, carries information, but then anything that's a semiconductor will also be part of propagating information. And the analogy to this is when we buy a new phone or computer, it's really quick. And like the information gets passed around quickly, and we're very happy because the computer or the phone works really fast. We can download things quickly. It doesn't take 3 hours for the document to close. It doesn't crash or freeze. So that's why in our bodies, the quicker the information can get transmitted around, the better we're going to function. Of course, having all chemical reactions involve electrons moving about. So again, we've already talked about why having lots of electrons is important, but then having a very efficient and quick communication system in the body is really important as well. So some ways this would manifest would be just something like brain fog that people are always complaining about. So the fascia is really important, and how it's hydrated, because like I said, it doesn't work when it's dry. And then this would again be being mindful of excessive exposure to non-native EMFs, which I appreciate we can't live without our technology, but then using it stupidly all the time in bed unnecessarily is just going to dry out our fascia. And also not enough grounding, as in going outside, putting your feet on the earth. If there's scorpions and nasty things in the grass, you can buy like grounding straps, like they're called anti-static straps. I've just got them on my sandals at the moment. So there's no reason not to be able to find somewhere to ground. And it's very beneficial for your fascia. And then just in terms of just basic things that I think people should do, movement is very important for the body, and not just exercising for the sake of it because you want to burn calories. There's lots of very special sacred movements, for example, the Tibetan rites, sacred gymnastics, different kinds of yoga, all sorts of sort of traditional movements that have got patterns and shapes, and it's a way in which we interact with what we'd call the ether, which is what we're fundamentally the sort of base, the fabric of reality. So there's a lot more to movement than just stretching or burning calories. There's actually a very deep sort of connection that you can make. So people who've never done movement before will think I'm talking rubbish, and people that love dancing and particular kinds of yoga or there's sort of functional patterns, it can be very pleasurable. You get kind of tingles when you move in a certain way because you're sort of spiraling and unspiraling. So this is also because, again, like I said, fundamentally the whole universe is made of charge, and when we do these movements, move our fascia, it makes electrons. So it does actually make sense of how doing certain movements can be energizing as well as just feeling nice. So that's sort of in a kind of nutshell about collagen and fascia.
Right. And I think, at least in the States, I think women are getting so much information that, you know, you have to go to Orange Theory, you have to do this workout, you have to do that workout. Most of them are all inside, and they're overstressing their bodies because they think that they have to be doing a certain workout to achieve a certain goal, when in reality, it's just that they're creating this electricity in their body. They're creating electrons, which allows them to absorb more sunlight, right? So it's this kind of dance between gathering electrons, creating negative energy. We are a battery, and it's getting our water system working. So I wanted you to talk a little bit more about our water system, because most of my listeners don't understand what exclusion zone water is, and that how we hydrate has more to do with just drinking our, quote, 8 glasses of water every day, and that we have a 4 cytochrome where we actually make water. Can you explain a little bit how we may be our best source of water?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, just in simple terms, we're kind of 99 molecules of water and then 1 molecule of something else, which could be protein or fat or sugar or DNA.
Right.
So obviously that's there for a reason. So it's something really important, and we just choose to ignore it. When it comes to water, first of all, it's got loads of really unusual properties. And one of them is that under certain circumstances, it can do something called form 4th phase of water when it charge separates. So it makes an exclusion zone, just like a no-go area, but then it separates into minus and plus, or protons and electrons. So even if you don't know anything about physics, we all know that a battery has a plus and a minus. So we can, in simple terms, think, okay, this 4th phase or coherent water, you might hear it called, or gel water, what's special about it is that it can separate into a plus and a minus. So now we can make something called a potential difference, or the electrons can or the protons can move and flow. So we've got the ability to be a battery, as in we can store charge, and the sunlight is the thing which would provide the energy. So that means we're acting like a solar panel, and our water is holding the energy. And then with this particular kind of water, the electrons can move now. So that means we've got like an electric current. So it just means that water very believably can act as a solar panel. And it also water absorbs red light and ultraviolet light. So whatever comes out of the sun, our water battery, we'll call it, can get charged up. And then things that can be very dehydrating would be artificial blue light. Like, I'll just use an airport, for example, because it's full of artificial blue light, because they want to illuminate all the shops in a particular way to lower our dopamine, to make us buy a load of things in the duty free that we or eat food we shouldn't. And then also the airport is like, there's thousands of people all using their phones, and we've got all the technology to run aeroplanes. And even at quite a short flight that's 1 or 2 hours, people will say, gosh, that was just so exhausting. All I did was sit and, have a cup of tea on the plane, and I'm exhausted. It's just because it's the best way to get dehydrated. It doesn't mean we mustn't use airports, because we can't. Having a fear mindset also is very draining of our electrons. So we have to use airports. It's just using a real life example that people can appreciate, that an airport is really dehydrating. So that's what it feels like when our water battery gets pressurized or put under pressure or flattened, because the radiation is going to dehydrate us probably about 15 to 20%. And then the blue light, that's going to interfere with our mitochondria, and our mitochondria make something called ATP, which is energy, but that's kind of more the old school version of how the body works. They also make water, as you correctly said, at complex number 4. So the complexes, it's just inside the mitochondria, there's complex 1 to 4, and the electrons just go down like an electric current, pushing protons up like a gradient, and then the protons are going to fall back down something called ATPase, and that makes ATP. And then at complex 4, these protons are going to mix with electrons and also oxygen and make what we'd call metabolic water, which is very, very low in deuterium. It's like our own homemade water. So humans are a camel in lots of ways. We just aren't as good as camels at making water out of different materials. So if we annoy the mitochondria, like an airport's very stressful for them, they just make less water. So in an airport, first of all, the mitochondria are not making water properly, and the general environment is very dehydrating. So that together makes us feel really bad. And then it teaches people, okay, this is how important hydration is. It doesn't matter how much water you drink in the airport or on the airplane, the nasty feeling doesn't go away. You've got to, like, normally when people have been in an airport, they're off on vacation and all they're doing is thinking, I can't wait to get to the beach or whatever, because then the way to undo the airport is to do the opposite. So you could swim in the sea, which is very grounding. And then once again, you're connected to Earth, so you can charge up by grounding, fill yourself back up with electrons. You can go in the sun again, which is all the right colors of light. The UV light, the red light, the natural blue lights, the near infrared. So you get bathed in all of this healing light. So that's the best way to recharge yourself. And like I said before, the UV light and the red light's going to recharge your water battery. Just being away from the technology and the blue light's going to be useful. And then if you're grounded as well, that means the electrons are then going to flow back in to help sort of expand your water back up again.
Right.
So yeah, in terms of just drinking 8 glasses of water a day, that's sort of, like you said correctly, that's more about bulk water, like water in a glass. We're talking about special water that's like 4th phase or gel-like, or like a liquid crystalline, that's got these special properties to do with storing electricity and moving it. So it's like powers us. And then, as you correctly said, the mitochondria makes our own homemade, very low deuterium water. So again, the deuterium, we talked about it before, was just a heavy hydrogen that basically burdens you, in simple terms. Right. So that's sort of in a nutshell for people who are just learning about this, of how you can feel it in your own body, as in the airport and the beach, and then diving in a bit to the physics and the biology of how and why.
And that our health fundamentally comes down to that process that you described within the mitochondria in terms of our energetic capacity, kind of this energy over inflammation. It's how we are tunneling electrons across these cytochrome chains and ultimately taking in oxygen, splitting water, and letting out carbon dioxide and making our own water in this process.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's like a battery. So if we think about, like, we can pretend the electron transport chain's an obstacle course. So if it's all stretched out and the electrons are people trying to do the obstacle course, if it's longer, it's harder for the electrons to go down. And some of them are going to sort of give up and just wander off. And that's what we'd call a free radical. So free radicals, like people may have heard, are demonized. And they're only a problem when they're in a place at an unwanted time or in an unwanted amount. So you're completely correct that if the electron transport chain or the mitochondria are not swollen or stretched or inflamed and nice and compact, the electrons or the electricity is just going to go down more efficiently and quicker, so that everything happens quicker. We were talking about how food gets metabolized in the mitochondria. Then carbon dioxide is a really important signaling molecule, not a poison. and also, of course, making water. So the better that the mitochondria work, the more efficient the electron transport chain, as in the quicker they go down, because the closer the complexes are, the faster they'll travel. That's just the kind of laws of physics and distances. And then also, if the mitochondria, the complexes are spread out, the electrons are more likely to, we'll just say, escape. And that would be a free radical in a bad context, which is going to create inflammation and then subsequent sort of problems. So that's sort of in simple terms. And also in terms of just being scientific about it, it's accepted that about 85% of chronic disease is due to bad mitochondria, but that includes cancer as well. So they are, they do get recognition, but I don't think enough of how important they are. But it's like having your phone or your laptop. If the battery goes in your phone, it doesn't matter if you've got an iPhone 25 million, it's not going to work. Right. So it's the same as us. If our battery is rubbish, then it's going to be a problem for us.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to touch on, and not to go on a tangent, but you were talking about, I guess, the angstroms in the electron transport chain, and which brings me to the question of cold thermogenesis or cold plunging, which is very popular. So is the ultimate benefit of cold plunging and cold thermogenesis to make that electron transport chain tighter and more efficient?
Yes, that's one of them. I think for your audience that the idea of an angstrom might be a bit confusing, but I think what's important, we'll just finish off on the bit we were talking about of the obstacle course. So if we move these complexes, say 1 angstrom further away from each other, it actually lowers the efficiency by, I think, a factor of 5 or 10. So a very small spreading out creates quite a large problem with the flow of the electrons. So to go back to like, how does this work? If we make our bodies cold, the mitochondria are going to sense this, and then they're going to ramp up all of their production, and they also make heat as well. So when the water inside the mitochondria gets heated, what effect that actually has is it's going to squash the complexes closer together. So yes, by a different effect through water does cold thermogenesis. So it doesn't freeze the mitochondria and make them do that, because when we freeze water, it kind of it expands. So what's happening really is it's an effect through heating the water in the mitochondria, because the mitochondria work harder, make more heat and light and water. So the overall effect is the water actually is what's compressing the chain together. So that's why the cold thermogenesis done properly can be anti-aging, because there's something called heteroplasmy rate, and that's just sort of a way to describe how inefficient your mitochondria are. So the more inefficient they are, the more aging there is. So if you make them more efficient and the electron flow better and just say squashing for now, compressing the chain, everything's more efficient. So that's sort of a recipe for sort of longevity as well. But just diving into a cold plunge for 6 hours isn't the solution. The other really important thing about cold thermogenesis and health is, first of all, it stimulates the production of norepinephrine and dopamine. So it's very important in, say, northern latitudes to help prevent season like depression in the winter. But lots of people get depression and lack of motivation at any time of the year. Then it's also, cold stimulates brown fat. And brown fat is Mother Nature's antidote to diabetes. So babies have a lot of brown fat, and babies are always in ketosis. So they have, if you feed them properly, they have like an ideal metabolism. So just sitting in the house all the time with a temperature just warm is not how our bodies are meant to be. So actually exposing the brown fat, which is on the front of your chest and the back of your upper back, is really beneficial for insulin sensitivity, but it's also very important for leptin sensitivity. So it comes into metabolic problems. So a lot of people do have insulin resistance and leptin resistance. So using cold can be a helpful way to improve the signaling in those molecules. But then, as you said, there's a deeper reason of improving the function in the mitochondria. There's another important reason that cold can be a little bit stressful to cells temporarily. So they're going to make ultraviolet light inside the body. So this was discovered, like scientists have known for ages about, it's not just Gerwich and the onion experiments. There are loads of experiments now about cells emitting biophotons, especially ultraviolet light. They'll emit all different colors. So when we expose ourselves to the cold, the cells make UV light inside the body. So this means we can make a different sort of melanin in the body. And also UV light is very healing. So if we're not going to damage ourselves from our own ultraviolet light that we make. And there's a whole other layer I could go into about what happens from ultraviolet light that comes out of our bodies. That's very important for other things as well, but we'll just stick to cold can make the body make ultraviolet light, and ultraviolet light's very healing, and we can't burn ourselves from what we make on the inside.
Right.
So that's why cold thermogenesis has lots of benefits at the quantum level. But like anything, overdoing it can be stressful. So you have to listen to your own body. And it's a bit like the solar callus. If somebody's never done cold therapy before, you just start by doing cold face plunges, because that can also stimulate the production of oxytocin, which a lot of people might have heard of as a sort of love and trust hormone. And also it can stimulate something called BDNF, which is brain-derived nootropic factor. So just in simple language, it's just helpful for nerves in the brain, things like memory. Exercise stimulates BDNF as well. So just a cold face plunge can do that. Then people couldn't graduate into cold showers or having a bath and choosing how much ice they put in so it's not freezing. Some people might want to swim in the sea because sometimes the sea is too warm to do cold thermogenesis. So you have to find a lake inland somewhere like Michigan's plenty of lakes there, plenty of lakes also in Canada. And then the sea in some states is kind of warm. So but anything below body temperature is classed as cold thermogenesis. So it's like a whole other planet of different protocols that you can build using the cold. But everybody can get a bowl, put some ice cubes in it and put their face in it. That's perfectly safe for everybody. So again, the cold has got lots of benefits as well.
Well, it's kind of amazing what you're saying when I kind of first learned, and I'm a lot newer to this than you, obviously, but just that we actually generate UV light when we get that cold, and it's kind of our evolutionary survival, right? So people at really high latitudes that are in cold all the time and that have access to very cold temperature, water, and air, it's kind of evolution's way of survival, right? It's allowing them to actually create UV on the inside to get these beneficial wavelengths of light generated inside of them to survive that period of time. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, definitely. But also the cells make UV light under other circumstances, and also DNA emits UV light as well. So it's just something that, yes, cold is going to increase UV light in the body, but then accessing a bliss state, as in being in a coherent state when your heart and your brain are all in coherence, and then you're outside in coherence with the sun and the Schumann resonance, that creates a big stack of coherence. And then the DNA under special circumstances emits ultraviolet light and longitudinal waves. So that's a very important state for all sorts of things to do with the power of the mind. But also bliss states are hugely healing, and you're not in a fear state, because that's when we drain our charge. So there are other circumstances when the body would make ultraviolet light for its own benefit. And then ultraviolet light's important in cell signaling to do with cell growth and division. But absolutely, you're correct that it's one way that we could survive in northern latitudes, but also our mitochondria, some people have got uncoupled haplotypes and other people have got coupled. So people who live at the equator and have always lived there, their mitochondria are more efficient because they don't uncouple and make heat, whereas somebody like me or another Scandinavians and all the rest of us in the northern latitudes, our mitochondria have the capacity to uncouple oxidative phosphorylation from the electron transport chain and make heat. And that's just a method to not freeze to death. But it's just slightly less efficient than the electrons being coupled. A lot of the time, why certain sort of athletes, equatorial athletes, just have sort of more power. Not that I'm going to go into that. There's no one form better than the other. It's not better to be coupled versus uncoupled. It's just something to bear in mind when choosing somewhere to live and how much cold thermogenesis to use. Because somebody like me who does have an uncoupled haplotype, I'm fine with cold thermogenesis. But then people who are partially uncoupled or coupled really don't. They have to do the cold, like not as long and warmer, because there's like everything, there's always a fine balance between stressing your body out and being helpful. So it is a hormetic response, the cells making the UV when you get cold. So you don't want to overstress them, because more UV that you make yourself isn't necessarily better. The UV is not going to hurt you, but the rest of the body is going to get pretty stressed out if you overdo cold thermogenesis. But then a lot of people are frightened of it as well. So it's like, I think, graded exposure and just to accept that it's something beneficial and it's an extra toolbox. Like looping back to what you said about metabolism and weight loss. If somebody's got injuries and they can't exercise, then they can use cold as a metabolic stimulator while they're healing. So there's lots of uses. And some people hate gyms and they'd much rather go and swim in a lake or fill their bathtub with ice and sit in that. So it's just another way to stimulate your metabolism.
Okay, great. Do you have time for a couple of more questions?
Yeah, just one more is totally fine. Yes.
One more. Okay, great. Yeah. So I guess if I only have one more, what I'd like to hear would be your top 3 recommendations for people to improve their mitochondrial health.
Okay. Seeing the sunrise, because it sets the clocks, making sure your bedroom is pitch black, free of tech, make it a major safe place, make sure it's not too hot, because even if you mess up in the day, if you can use the darkness to sleep and heal, that's a massive benefit. And then I would just say, make a conscious effort to go outside more, even if I've confused you massively with all these different times the different light comes out. Just going outside is better than being inside, and that's a really good place to start. I would think. And also, even if blue blocking glasses look stupid, our eyes are kind of the windows to our souls, not just things which make neurotransmitters, and we need to protect them. So I would say that's a really good place to get started. That's a really hard question because it obviously depends on the context. But I think with the mitochondria, first of all, they need to have light and dark. So the bedroom has to be dark. Then they need to be switched on properly to see the sunrise. And then, the blue light is a bit of a problem. Yeah, we need to block the artificial blue lights. So that's a really hard one. And just going outside is going to feed them the wavelengths of light they're designed to receive. So that'll make the mitochondria happy. And also, if you just go outside, the sun knows what to do. Your cells know what to do. You just go out and go in it. You can't do it wrong.
Right.
Like trying to be perfect is also a great big stressor for people when they first encounter quantum biology.
Right. It's true. And I think, speaking to a lot of women, there's so many paradigms of health where we have to follow things exactly. When I always say, it's consistency over perfection. And if you had a day where your light wasn't quite right, or you went out, or whatever happened, that just start again and reset and just try to establish this circadian rhythm over time, because it's the biggest driver to your health. And, do your best. And
oh yeah, that's really important point actually, because not to beat yourself up if you did it, because any improvement is going to be massively beneficial. And also, the more you you improve your circadian rhythm, the more wiggle room you've got. Because we obviously have to see friends, and you can't not go to your children's birthday party or your son's really important baseball game because it happens to be under blue light in the evening. You have to do the best you can when you can, but then not become a recluse either, because you'll just create a different problem, because there's all sorts of other layers when we get into quantum biology and how it's to do with the mind. But it all starts with connecting more with nature and making sure your body clocks are in time, because that's a really sort of good start. And then the more connected you become with nature, you'll find it opens other doors for you. And like you said, I think just making a start is the most important thing. It's a bit like when people do a keto diet and then they think they're a really bad person because they ate carbs. And it's like, so what? Life happens. It doesn't matter. Just forget it, because just beating yourself up is a really good way to drain your charge. Like fear mindsets and negative thoughts also are a massive energy leak. So yeah, that's a really important point, is, just to get started. And I agree with you completely. People come into groups. Some people, it takes ages to make them do something, and the other group just want to do everything perfectly with a protocol. And also it depends on where you live, which state you're in, what time of year it is, how old you are, whether your husband or wife is on board with this, because I think most of your listeners are women. We never know, there could be men. So the partner, there's so many different, like there's not one size that fits all, but there's one general idea that we can all strive to do.
Right. Which is really exciting, I think, that we all share this same light, and we all can, make small changes. And we might look a little bit strange wearing blue blocking glasses, but we're moving toward, getting our light right and getting our circadian rhythm in check, which hopefully will, as you said, kind of give you a little bit more wiggle room to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your circadian biology is less difficult to sort of rock. The same, the more coherent you are and the better your redox, the harder it is for other frequencies, because everything's just energy and vibration. So other frequencies could be illnesses. So the better redox you've got, the more coherent you are, as in the timing and is smooth and you're in line with nature, the more resilient you are to outside sort of negative kind of wavelengths or vibrations or just things. So there's more to grounding than just standing with bare foot. We need to be grounded now. There's so much going on in the world that we want sort of some kind of stability or coherence as well. And yeah, absolutely. It's just, doing anything's better than nothing. And if you sleep in by accident and miss the sunrise, well, you've got 24 hours until another one. And also the idea of people all together, all doing something the same time at sunrise, everybody out doing like praying or gratitude or ceremonies or whatever. The power of group minds is very important, and just the idea of that there's lots of other people all doing the same with you is important as well.
Right. Well, thank you, Dr. Sara Pugh. You're amazing. I am humbled by your knowledge and just your dedication to sharing your knowledge and actually making it something that most people can understand. You did get into a lot of things, but you made it very clear, and we're still working through it, but we thank you very much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Just call me Sarah. I'm just Sarah, so thank you. Yes, and hopefully people did understand.
No, it was amazing. Yes. Amazing.
Okay.
And I hope you'll talk to us again, because we have lots more questions.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm really excited about Squint and what you're doing. I think it's a brilliant idea, because the more people talking about this, the better. Right. And I'm sure the way you explain it to people, some people will understand what you said and not me, because they just like to have different voices or different ways of the same. Or sometimes people just need validation that we're not, lunatics who just made this up. It's actually something that can really help women, whether they're a baby woman or a lady who's sort of 85. There's something for all ages here, and we can all do it together as well.
Exactly.
Great.
It's wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
you.
Safe travels, and
Thank you.
it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very, very much.
Oh, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really excited. So let me know what else I can do to help.
Will do. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Okay.
Thank you.